Welcome back to PTMTR, where today we are going to be making the most stunning, incredible pizzas, the kind that will make you want to slap your local pizza maker. Start by weighing out 500 grams of strong white bread flour, then go in with a pinch of salt, namely about 5 grams of salt should do the trick. Now go in with a light drizzle of olive oil. You don't have to be accurate with the measurement on this, about a tablespoon's worth should be enough. Now in a separate bowl, weigh out about 7 grams of dry active yeast, and then you want to go in with 10 grams of plain white sugar, which is essentially going to be the food for our yeast. Then weigh out 325 grams of plain mineral water, and I have mentioned this in a previous episode where tap water can be used, but the chlorine content in it doesn't create the ideal environment for the yeast to bloom, so just mineral water is fine. Warm it up and mix it into the yeast and sugar mixture until it all dissolves, and set it aside for about 20 to 25 minutes. Give your flour a quick mix just to make sure all the ingredients that you previously put in there are thoroughly mixed through and through, and hopefully by this time your yeast solution should have been ready. A dead giveaway for me is when it forms a thick froth at the top. Don't actually get rid of that, just fold it into the mixture as well. It's just going to bring more air into the mix. Combine all the ingredients together until the flour absorbs most of the moisture and it forms a rough dough. Now either knead by hand for 15 minutes or set it on a medium mixture with this kneading hook on a stand mixer, and it's just going to take a lot of the manpower and elbow grease out of that for you. Now once that's all done, it should have helped the gluten molecules align, resulting in a stretchier, almost silkier, springier dough, and it should look something like this. It's quite elastic at this point. Tip it out onto a light floured surface and give it a good knead for about 2 to 3 minutes. I like to use this method. It's a sort of stretch and fold kind of thing. Not only will it make you look like you know what's up, but it'll actually incorporate a lot of oxygen into the dough, which actually helps with the gluten development, and telling people that will also make you seem smart. Finally, just seal off the dough and cover it with a bit of olive oil to help it from drying out and forming a crust. So when it does expand, it expands evenly and not lopsided or anything like that. Then just put it back into the bowl and cover it with a bit of cling film. I'm actually going to let this rise for 24 hours in the fridge, a cold rise, or you can just set it aside in a warm dark area for about 2 to 3 hours, but don't do that to yourself. Put it in the fridge. Okay, so prepping our topping, we're actually going to go in with a bit of chicken today. I've got some all-purpose seasoning, left the skin onto the chicken just to retain a bit of moisture when I do eventually bake this thing. Put a few slits in it just to make sure all the ingredients are getting nice and infused within the chicken breast. Season it down with a bit of chili powder, peri-peri if you want, salt, pepper, and a bit of olive oil. Then massage it all in so the seasoning gets through and through to every nook and cranny. And then you just want to cover it up and stick it in the oven for about 30-35 minutes depending on the thickness of your slice of chicken. And once that's ready, just open the package up and give it an open bake for about 10 minutes. What this is going to do is just form a nice crust around the chicken, further intensifying the flavors. Essentially what you want to do is make this into a little sort of flavor bomb. Now we're going to start making our sauce by finely dicing 4 large cloves of garlic and 1 small onion or shallot. Shallot probably works better, but I don't have any of those to hand. Either way, I know some people would probably say, just a plain tomato sauce is the best way for classic pizzas, and I just find my recipe actually elevates the tomato and further accentuates it, makes it lift. Okay, so here's sort of my secret ingredient. I like to go in with 1 to 2 tablespoons worth of sun-dried tomatoes. Don't be too concerned about draining all the oil out. That actually retains a lot of nice strong flavors, and it's just going to demand a bit more presence in the sauce. Chop them up finely and run your knife through a few times as you would with herbs, just to make sure everything is quite fine and turns into a bit of a paste. And get a hot saucepan, put a bit of oil inside it, and we're going to start sauteing these ingredients down, making sure all the flavors get acquainted. Now once the onions and garlic have become almost translucent, we're going to start adding in the rest of our ingredients. Start by remembering to open your tomato puree, put in about a tablespoon's worth. Then go in with a healthy pinch of oregano, a bit of basil paste, and finally a whole tin of plum tomatoes. Rinse the tin out so you get all the sauce out with a bit of water, and it's just going to thin down the sauce. And use whole tin tomatoes, not the chopped kind. They actually use a higher grade of tomatoes for the whole tins. Then go in with a splash of balsamic. I've actually got pomegranate balsamic. Any sort of balsamic actually works just to cut through the richness of the sauce. Then go in with a heaped teaspoon of paprika, and finally a pinch of salt. Just season it to taste. Let the sauce simmer for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then what we're going to do is puree and run it through a sieve so everything turns silky smooth. You can leave it rustic if you want, but I just prefer mine that way. I'm actually going to make 4 kinds of pizza today. We're going to start by chopping our cheeses. On the left we've got our amazing buffalo mozzarella, in the middle a classic 4 cheese, and on the right here some stunning smoked mozzarella. Try not to go too thick on slicing your cheeses, because trust me when I tell you less is more on these pizzas. Snip yourself off a couple of beautiful leaves of fresh basil and coat them in a bit of olive oil. I like to just lightly toss mine, and just to make sure that it doesn't actually burn when we put them in the oven later. Once your chicken is actually done dry roasting in the oven, it should be nice and crisp. Just take a couple of forks and shred it up. Not too fine, just sort of pull it apart and let it cool down a bit. I like to keep sort of almost substantial chunks in there so you can actually feel and taste the chicken. Now this dough I did make earlier, it's been cold risen in the fridge for 24 hours. Don't forget to grease your cling film like I did, otherwise you will lose a lot of golden dough. But look at that absolutely phenomenal texture in there. It's almost got a webby texture to it. So lightly flour down your work surface, and now's the time to get your frustrations out. Who needs a therapist? Punch all the air out of the dough and then just tip it out onto your lightly floured surface. So we're going to work the dough until it just sticks to the surface but comes apart quite easily. Once you've reached this point, just flour down your knife or your dough cutter and section the dough into 4 or 6 equal pieces. Shape the separate pieces into circles as best as you can manage, tuck them into themselves, and just set them aside with a damp cloth on top of them while you work on one pizza at a time. Now granted, I'm not an expert at shaping a pizza base, but what you want to do is just sort of massage it out roughly into a circle, a large circle, roughly about the size that you want your pizza to be basically. Tuck your knuckles in and lift the pizza up and let the weight of itself sort of stretch itself out. Now what we're trying to achieve here is for the center of the pizza to be as thin as humanly possible. Now don't worry about breaking it. I mean, it is extremely resilient, the gluten, but even if it does break, you can either just pinch it off together or pinch a bit of dough off one of the other balls and just fill in the gap. Be very careful, however, not to touch the crust, because we want a lot of air to be around in the crust. It's just going to result in a lighter, fluffier, chewier crust. Now this is the ace up my sleeve. Sprinkle the crust with a bit of semolina flour, so when you do bake it, it gives it a nice bite and it just elevates the crust. Take a hot pan and lightly drizzle some olive oil in it. We are going to fry the underside of the pizza base until it turns golden brown. Now here's where we get creative. We're going to start designing our pizza. I like to go in with a bit of Parmigiano Reggiano and a healthy pinch of oregano, just a classic New York style, and go in with a healthy dollop of your pizza sauce and just spread it out thinly across the base. This one I'm actually constructing a classic Neapolitan with my buffalo mozzarella and olive oil tossed basil leaves, and again finish it off with a light drizzle of extra virgin. I like to stick it in the grill for about 2 to 3 minutes while everything turns golden brown and crispy, crunchy, and just cooks the rest of the dough through, and it's just phenomenal. Here's a bit of chicken and sweet corn, plain smoked mozzarella, and this is your classic 4 cheese and chicken as well. Now I'm begging you guys, please, you have to try this recipe. I am telling you, it is leaps and bounds ahead of any store-bought pizza, any pizzeria that does it. It's absolutely phenomenal, and I genuinely had to leave my reaction in just to prove a point. Oh good lord, you gotta try this. That is phenomenal. So guys, please like, comment, subscribe, share the video around, and please visit my Patreon page as well. I'll leave a link in the description for you guys. Also a link to this recipe. For Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook and all of that. Happy cooking.